My name is Dr. Pete Knapp. After my PhD in air quality, I moved from academia to filmmaking because I thought storytelling in this form may have a greater impact in society against the rise of the far right. Towards the end of my PhD in air quality, I was getting quite frustrated about the impact that science was having on society. There was too much focus on the minds of the minority and too little on the hearts of the majority. The impact that storytellers and emotive rhetoric was having on the public during Brexit, the vaccine rollout, and especially in climate action, was being dominated by the right and the far right across the world. So I looked at a map of major fires around the Mediterranean, and the hotspots in purple were in Greece, Algeria, Spain, and Portugal, with another concentration in red in Sicily. So I planned a route on public transport, and I spent 3 months, the longest I could spend in Europe after Brexit, around these European sites. The first place that I visited was Dardia on the border between Greece and Turkey. And here the fire was the largest that the European Union had ever seen. It spread to the coast where hospitals had to be evacuated by ferry because the roads were in flames. The immigrants and refugees from around the world, including from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, even Bangladesh and Morocco, were entering Europe from Turkey. And on this occasion, I was told by a firefighter that refugees hiding in the dense Greek woodlands were cooking, and this is how the fire started. The local people I spoke with were angry about the way that the Greek news media were reporting it. And rather than focus on the under-resourced firefighters or climate change or abandonment, they focused on the most vulnerable in society, at that time, the refugees. And the wall that Greece built across the border to Turkey to keep out refugees was started in around 2015 and has been extended ever since. But it is expensive, and it prevents Greek people from being able to go within 1 kilometre of it without a permit, and it is just a symptom of breakdown of society from fear. So I wondered if immigrants were blamed for the fires in other parts of Europe, and Sicily was greatly affected by the fires, and it's a hub for small boats from northern Africa, so I wondered if there was a link there too. However, the fires in Sicily appear to be related to liberating land to build wind turbines. Green energy grants from the EU have attracted organised crime, including the mafia. And 20% of the green energy grants were found to be taken by the mafia for these kinds of purposes. But the land had to be burnt before it could be built on. By law, no land could be built on within 10 years after a fire, but the maps were not updated after the fires occurred. I was told by local activists that this is due to lack of resources from the fire service and through corruption. Action is being taken where local people wearing high-vis jackets stand at the road junctions that lead to the sites where the fires are starting. These roads go to the top of hills, and during times when the winds are strong is when people go there to start them. These activists claim that their actions have prevented many fires since they started just a few years ago. I heard of the land of fires around Naples, where a mafia group called the Camorra had illegally disposed of industrial waste that was burnt, and that created plumes of toxic air and leaching toxic water into nearby agricultural land you can see around this site. The Italian Cancer Research Unit Institute in Naples found a 47% increase in tumours for men in particular in the Naples area compared with the rest of Italy. So this pyramid contains a huge pile of industrial waste that hasn't yet been cleared. I interviewed an environmental engineer who had helped to put the Camorra boss in prison for these crimes. The next location was around Portugal and Spain. The highly flammable eucalyptus trees brought in from Australia became a huge part of the economy in the region. They were scaled up rapidly in the 1970s, and the number of fires also grew rapidly about a decade later. The eucalyptus plantations are called green deserts, void of life and waiting to burn. Once a spark catches them alight, they have evolved to burn quickly with a pyre of dry material that collects at the base, seeds that pop at high temperatures, and leaves that fly long distances to spread the fire as widely as possible. The eucalyptus industry maintained that the eucalyptus prevents fires and that they are sustainable, but instead they suck up all the water from the soil, which becomes dusty and drains away when it rains, making the hillsides bare. But eucalyptus also makes the soil hard, so floods are more likely to happen. The EU subsidies have classified burning of eucalyptus for energy as a renewable energy source, which has led to the industry taking enormous subsidies and scaling up plantations. Pellets have even been sent to Drax in the UK, sold at a premium due to the UK's absurdly high subsidies given to Drax. These big companies have a revolving door between CEOs of these companies and government ministers responsible for regulating the industry. In 1989, after the eucalyptus fires grew exponentially, 800 people gathered to destroy 200 hectares of eucalyptus. And it was one of the largest environmental protests that had ever taken place in Portugal. The valley has reportedly not burned since the eucalyptus were removed. And protests continue today against the domination and destruction caused by the eucalyptus industry and their movement into biomass energy. I spoke with Antifa groups across southern Europe, with active student populations in Greece and Spain, and they were focusing on changing the system to involve more community, overthrowing capitalism and working more closely with nature. Everyone I spoke with wanted a growth in healthy communities. Firefighters talked to me about improving workers' rights and conditions, and others told me how they were involving communities through creating people's assemblies to deal with the aftermath of major fires. Overall, I found that economic growth was a fundamental cause for the fires. Big business fought against the threats such as shepherd's goats, which were helpful in clearing the flammable material. The rural areas became abandoned due to lack of opportunities, and young people, especially in Greece, left rural areas for cities and for other countries. This led to towns being populated by older people who were targeted by the right-wing media. Abandoned rural areas became more flammable with grasses and shrublands. And efforts from big business to reduce taxes led to under-resourced public services, such as the fire service. This has led to fires being harder to control. Economic growth supports inequalities in society that provide opportunities for the far right to gain support. The far right blame minorities such as immigrants who have led to or who've hidden in dense woodlands to cook and unintentionally start fires. Local marginalised groups where local wisdom that has acted to suppress fires are being blamed. The far right is linked to organised crime such as the mafia, who are adapting to access the vast subsidies from the EU for green energy, money that is needed to address climate change with proper solutions, not money that's making the fires even worse. Climate change is making the landscapes and winds hotter and drier in certain areas, which makes them more vulnerable to wildfires. And biodiversity loss from climate change can lead to tree diseases that make fire more likely. The solutions people mentioned again and again from economic growth was degrowth, permaculture, and a change from a capitalist system. The solution to the growth of the far right was to reduce inequality by creating healthier communities and re-establishing a connection with nature. And the solutions to climate change were all intertwined. The film I'm making is called Fires and Fascism, and I aim to use the stories people have told me about the issues and the solutions to fires as a proxy for improving society as a whole, and to suppress the very scary and rapid rise of the far right across the world. Here is the trailer, and the film should be ready for release around the end of 2025. I'd appreciate any support you can provide, as the film is crowdfunded and independent. There is a QR code at the end to donate. Thank you. Two things are raging through Europe and the whole world right now. Fires and the far right. I'm Dr. Pete Knapp, and I spent 3 months travelling across Europe, interviewing victims and experts of smoke and wildfires. I found how these fires are connected to the fascism of the past and the fascists and far right of the future. Organised crime and political corruption were and still are involved. In these troubling times, we need active hope. We need to know what to do. What happens next is up to us all. And these communities I met along the way, they were onto something.